Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. We will be starting our webinar just now. My name is Irakli Beridze, and I'll be your host for the webinar. And thank you for joining us, and my heartfelt thanks for keynote speaker and the panelists as well who will be joining today. We are living in, and as you all agree, in an extraordinary times. On the one hand, we're struggling to recover from the global pandemic, which caused multifaceted crises with a toll on the health, economy, societies, and human rights. Lockdowns and other disruptions imposed a severe financial and fiscal distress on the countries. The World Bank projected that the pandemic will push between 70 to 100 million people into extreme poverty, as nearly 500 million full-time jobs were lost as a result of pandemic, and probably more will be lost in the process as well. The crisis also exacerbated issues such as unemployment, discrimination, food insecurity, and of course, crime and security. At the same time, we're experiencing an exponential growth of technology. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things. And today we will be discussing how to take advantage of this growth and leverage the technology to bridge inequality in a new world that will be opening up in front of us in coming years. According to the United Nations Comprehensive Response on the COVID-19, we need to harness the potential of new technologies to create decent jobs for all. United Nations Technology and Innovation Report, which was released just now in 2021, highlights that emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and blockchain can play a vital role in sharing an inclusive recovery of this crisis. However, the United Nations has also warned that not all countries prepare to use and adopt frontier technologies. Indeed, there are digital divides between and within the countries related to age, disability, gender, geography, and socioeconomic status. For instance, while internet use is growing globally every year, including during the pandemic, access to the internet is not equal everywhere and everyone. And Chris Fabian, who is our keynote speaker, will be telling us in more details about it. According to the data from the ITU, under half of the world population don't use internet currently. Most of the people who don't use the internet live in the least developed countries. Only around 20% of the people in the least developed countries are online compared to 80+% of the people in the developed countries. Lack of digital skills and affordability of the internet remain some of the key barriers to its uptake and effective use, especially in the least developing countries. The ongoing pandemic obviously has aggravated these digital divides. As the United Nations Secretary General, António Guterres, stated, we need to move from death to health, from disaster to reconstruction, from despair to hope, from business as usual to transformation. The Sustainable Development Goals are more imperative now than ever. And that's why technology plays such a crucial role in achieving UN Sustainable Development Goals. AI, blockchain technologies, which we will be talking today, will have to be used and utilized to ensure that we will be living in a better world. With this, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Christopher Fabian, who bridges both the world of technology and public policy. And we're excited to have him kick off this discussion. And thank you, Chris, for joining us. He's the co-founder and co-lead of the GIGA project, a UNICEF and ITU partnership to connect every school in the world to the internet. Prior to this role, Chris set up the first fully crypto-denominated investment fund in the United Nations using Bitcoin and Ethereum to invest in open source tech startups. And before that, he co-founded UNICEF's Fiat Venture Fund with more than $40 million of investments in over 120 startups around the world. As I mentioned, Chris, you have a very interesting job that lets you see more of the trends from both the fast-moving technology world, also the slower-paced public policy one. We are delighted to have you here with us today to share some thoughts on where those trends connect, where they come apart, and what we should look out for over the coming years as we work to make the world a better, more united, and more livable place for all. Chris, floor is yours, and I'm so happy to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Irakli, and thank you for that introduction, which lays out all of my sins of bringing venture capital into the UN and then crypto after it. I hope that we'll talk about some positive things. I think that Irakli had asked me to come and sort of talk about what we see from our vantage point inside of this Giga initiative and in the UN. And as I was putting some remarks together, I was looking for like all the happy jokes about what the world could look like, and I found really, Irakli, a lot of somber space for reflection on where that technology and humanity comes together. So I just wanted, before we get into the really interesting panel discussion, to share sort of what we see from the point of view of an initiative in the United Nations that's bridging technology, finance, and equity. And a few years ago, I would have given a talk that sort of was something like, I had this slide that I would show, which shows the world, and it has a red line around the wealthy countries around sort of Europe and US and Japan, and a big red line. And it said something like, I don't remember, 80% of the people live outside of this line and 20% of the wealth exists outside of it. But inside of this red world, inside of that red line, you've got something like 20% of people and 80% of the wealth. There's even more than that, 88% of the wealth. And I would show that slide, and everybody would kind of look at it and be like, that's a funny Chris slide and shows disparity, but it doesn't really mean very much to us. And then all of a sudden we have COVID, and that world is very clear to us what that red line is, right? That we're now living in a world where the difference between the wealthy and the poor, between those who have access and who don't, is so clear. It's now embedded in all of our brains. People who are traveling are getting vaccine passports, and you can't leave a country without the right nationality of vaccine in your body. So suddenly that thing that was a very abstract discussion of a split world is becoming quite real. And so like, oops, we were right, and that's not great. And so then the other thing I would do in that talk is, after that, I would talk about these horrible things that are happening. And I said something like, I don't know, pandemics are going to come, and then climate change is going to do this, and nutritional status of kids will drop all over the world, and you'll have refugees. And that was all sort of happening 5-10 years ago, and now it's even more true. There are 80 million kids who are displaced by war or violence. So, and then I always try to tell some jokes at the end, and they never landed very well. And at the same time, after that, we would talk about technology trends. What did it look like 5 years ago, before COVID, before so much of the world changed? And what we would talk about drones and AI and blockchain and these kind of technology areas that had $100 billion of market cap sitting underneath them that were ready to fix things. Luckily, our skies are still sort of clear of drones for the moment, most of our skies. But we're certainly in a decade now where those big changes have come together, and we're in this very scary decade of change. And I would frame this discussion that way. Like, the next 10 years look really, really weird and really scary. And the future has always been a tough place, but it's even tougher because as humanity, we've placed all of our bets in the wrong places. Like, we've placed our bets against the planet. We've placed our bets against the environment. We've placed our bets as humanity against a vision of a singular human race, and we've placed our bets against the poor. So like, we're not doing a very good job at the gambling table, I think. We're sort of there, and we're like, wow, all of the horses that we're betting on are actually the horses of the apocalypse. And that's not a great place to be. Like, we're watching the oceans boil. I don't know if you saw that video just the other day. So we've managed to actually boil the oceans with fire. And like, our flags are so important that they're cutting people, and information is weaponized that it cuts people even more than flags do. So I wanted to come into this with a very positive vision, Irakli, but I think that we're in a world that's really, really risky for the poorest and for many of us as well. And still, technology is keeping up its kind of pace, right? So the value of digital assets and cryptocurrency just crossed, I don't know, 2.6 trillion the other day. It's now a little bit down, but it's growing, but it's in the hands of the world's wealthiest, right? The capacity of AI and machine learning doubles every time the chips get better and the silicon gets better, but it still targets poor people with its algorithms, or whichever postcode you're living in, or whatever color your skin is, affects the way that you feed into that data differently, and what it does to you. And we still see these companies, big companies, that are doing jobs that were formerly left to countries. Companies provide education now, right? Big companies provide identity. There are more people on Facebook than there are on all of the Facebook channels, and than there are in China. There are more people on WeChat than there are there's 2.5 times as many people on WeChat than there are in all of the EU countries. And suddenly these big companies are providing services that used to be in the domain of sovereign states. Where do you get your identity from? Where do you get your cash transfer from? And that's great, like if you have a smartphone and if you have the internet and if you're in that network. So I think we're in a little bit of a weird place, and it's very exciting to have this panel because the next decade looks really rough. Like stuff is coming apart around the edges, and the new structures that are there that are being built like don't really represent equality or fairness. But I do want to just end. So that's where I came into this, thinking about equality. There are a few hopeful pieces of light, Irakli, and some of the things we've talked about a lot are that, and I believe open source and open source philosophy is one of them. We have a world where the internet is splitting into these national internets. So we've got the US and the Chinese and the EU denominated internet, and you've got the Russian internet, and you've got the India stack. So that's, I don't know, 5 or so, but there's another internet that's emerging or has emerged, which is an open source internet, which sort of lives on the side somewhere. And I think there's a lot of very positive potential in the open source world. One of the initiatives that Norway has championed along with UNICEF is the Digital Public Goods Alliance, which is like a seed vault for open source software for public good. And that's very positive. Another one of the 4 or 5 pieces of light that we see is the trend of creators, of people building their own content, and not just in obvious places, not just on the TikToks of the world, but people building their content in digital worlds. If you're in digital games, if you follow the digital gaming space, you'll know that not only during the first 2 months of COVID, video game hours went up by 130%. So that was like a lot. But if you're in that space, people are building digital houses, building digital artifacts, creating digital shoes and digital art. You may have seen some of that sold for outrageous amounts of money. And those digital artifacts that people create can be sold for digital money, which can be used for things in the digital world or the real world. And that's a very interesting trend. And then, of course, as you said, Irakli, connectivity. So half of the world is still not connected to the good internet. Good speed internet. And of course, everybody's seen in wealthy countries pictures of kids sitting outside of a fast food restaurant trying to get internet to do their homework during COVID, or in poor countries, kids who aren't learning for like months at a time. But it's not just about the poor countries and the wealthy countries. Everything's mashed up now. Those red lines aren't just around big areas. They exist around neighborhoods, and they exist around schools. And Giga, this initiative that I co-lead, is trying to solve that. So that's, I think, a ray of hope. I don't know. We wake up every day thinking it is. And then finally, the future of money is kind of interesting. So if you connect those possibilities, the open source stuff and content creators and digital space and a more connected world, I think you get to what this panel has great expertise on. And I think that if you think about having creators with access to open source tools and having connectivity anywhere, you then start to think about what that layer of transaction is. What are the ways that you can move value among people and create new value in communities, but also spread it, move capital outside of capitals, get it away from the people who are kind of holding it. And so it'll be very interesting to hear this panel, which their expertise in digital finance and information security, talk about the systems underneath this emerging world and what we can do to make them better, make them stronger, and make sure that we connect the world's most vulnerable people. And then I would just say 2 last things. The world of the future is not a private sector world or a public sector world. It's a world of both. There's no more distinction. And that means we need to learn the language of both of those 2, how to speak with the speed of private sector, but also with the diligence of public sector where it works best. We just proposed the idea of connectivity credits. And there's a recent blog post about that, which looks like a carbon credit market, but for connectivity. And we would be unable to even describe the idea of a connectivity marketplace, a tokenized gigabyte, if we weren't able to work both with the technology providers and with governments at the same time. And so that's one just note. And then the other note is that, as a sort of word of warning, like the internet is a terrible place in general, right? Like it's terrible for kids who are trying to figure out what they want to do in their life. It's terrible for women who voice an opinion and have an avatar that actually looks like a woman. It's not a place that, like, the internet's not a place you would go after dark or even in the evening hours unless you had like a pretty strong suit of armor on and an escape plan. And so I don't think we want to rebuild the thing that's not working around us. I don't think we want to take what's there and build it like better. I think it needs to be rebuilt. And one of the ways that we've seen possible to do that is to start with the people who are the most vulnerable. Start to build the software and services for people who can't access traditional things, the person who doesn't have the smartphone, the person who can't see, the woman who, for whatever reason, is left behind in their community, and build it that way. And that product is stronger, it's more equitable, it'll make better business, but it'll also build a world that's more balanced. And so, Irakli, thank you for giving me the time and these few minutes for remarks. I think that there is a lot of darkness around us, but I couldn't imagine a better group of people and a better setup for talking about some of the opportunities than we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for coming and giving your insights on this. And of course, I mean, you did sort of draw up the map and the world which we are living in now. But what I'm really happy about is that there are a lot of sort of happy highlights there and interesting ones. And one of them was the creators, people who actually enable this world to move faster, move to a direction where we can live in a better world. And we have a fantastic panel here. We have people who have already done amazing things. They are currently doing amazing things from their perspective, from their worlds, and what we are doing is to bringing people from different perspectives, private sector, public sector, from the venture capitals. We have Vitek here from the gaming business, NFTs and blockchain, who is creating fantastic applications. We have, I'm going to introduce now a panel, all four panelists, and first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And then I will ask you one sort of a general question to all of you that maybe you can reflect on, and if you want to say a few words about your initiatives as well. And then later on, we will have a discussion with some follow-up questions. Now, panel, we have four panelists in the panel. First, let me introduce Brittany Kaiser, chair of the board of directors of the Griffon Digital Mining and co-founder of the Own Your Own Data Foundation. Griffon Digital Mining is the industry leading in 100% renewable green Bitcoin mining. We have Vitek Radomski, co-founder and chief technology officer of Engine, one of the leading blockchain and NFT companies in the world. And we are very pleased to have you here, Vitek, and we'll be looking to work closely with Engine, how to bring your solutions to the United Nations, to the mainstream, and to see how we can actually support vulnerable communities and others in living a better world. We are working with, we have Yalda Akur, my good friend, co-founder and managing partner of the Bracket Capital. And Yalda, among many other things, what she does is a passionate supporter of the United Nations for many years now in combating abuse of children online. And we're working closely on one of the projects which we are leading on how to leverage technology like artificial intelligence in combating abuse of children online. And last but absolutely not the least, we have Joseph Weinberg, co-founder of the Shift Network. And Shift Network is a public blockchain protocol designed to aggregate and embed trust and validation into data stored on public and private ecosystem. And he's also a member of the Forbes Technology Council and special advisor of the OECD. And Joseph and I were also discussing how to bring Shift Network to support our AI Center and other UN initiatives in many other things. And we're exploring these opportunities also currently together. Now, let me ask all of you actually a question. So from the perspective what I introduced, what is the title of this webinar, and also what Chris talked about, how do you see we can support communities who been vulnerable, are becoming more vulnerable, and decrease the inequality gap in the world, which is recovering from the COVID pandemic? I hope we are recovering from it. And can the technology really do the job, or we need sort of more than that in this regard? So let's start with Brittany, please. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Irakli, for having me and for such an incredible keynote to start us off as well. I think it is so incredibly important for us to realize that as thought leaders in one of the fastest growing industries in the world, that we have an unparalleled opportunity right now, not for wealth redistribution, but for wealth creation in the first place that has never existed before. We have the ability to, for the first time ever, allow anyone in the world that touches technology to be able to harness their own value and to earn value just by having the smallest, even most basic device with them. So I think it was incredible that Chris started off before this panel to talk about how we are actually going to start developing incentive structures to create connectivity and infrastructure for that connectivity around the world. I myself have spent very many years working on the Own Your Data movement, which allows both on a legal and regulatory front, as well as in terms of education and technology, for people to be able to produce value that they already are producing anyway, but to own the actual value of what they're doing every day. So from just taking a walk outside your house to being able to read content or record information that you are happy to share, usually every time you touch a device right now, that value is taken away from you. And unfortunately, the way that a lot of the technology industry has been built over the past couple decades is to continue to push that value up the chain to a company that has built that platform. Now, most people in the blockchain and distributed ledger technology industries are specifically building technologies so that individuals retain that value at the individual level. And it turns out through all of the work that we've done around the world that you can earn enough value every single day, value you already produce as a valuable human being, to at least take care of your very basic needs, to feed yourself and your family, to get access to clean water. That is possible. We can take care of our most basic human rights and protect the human rights of people around the world by giving them access to technology and connectivity. And one of the most...
Oh, please go.
Of course, yeah, I'll finish that up. And what I really think is that everyone here can be contributing in such an impactful way by helping build that technological infrastructure. And Irakli, as you asked, technology can't do the job alone. We need to have those incentive structures enshrined in legislation and regulatory initiatives. We have to have the education and awareness so that once people have access to these technologies and connectivity, they know how to use them and employ them for their own benefit. And that technology companies are within a legal and regulatory infrastructure where they have to provide those incentive structures. And I'm proud to be a part of the blockchain industry where we have really put together the infrastructure to make sure that that value is retained at the individual level. And at Griffin Digital Mining, we're doing it specifically in a sustainable way that has lasting positive impact for the communities in which we're working as well. But I can go into that later in the panel. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely, and I have a couple of questions for you later in the panel. And now, sort of, let's go with the round. And Vitek, please.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, we have this amazing technology available to us today, and I'm involved in non-fungible tokens, NFTs. We've seen these explode over the last 6 months or so. I think we can leverage blockchain to bridge inequality in these vulnerable communities and contribute to a sustainable future. So a non-fungible token, if some people still haven't heard, is like a unique, unforgeable digital good. You can tokenize, let's say, a piece of digital artwork, like we've seen a lot of people do in the last few months. But you can also tokenize physical goods, gamify your business, and really participate in the entire global world and economy without middlemen. So how can we use this to kind of reach society's kind of environmental, economic, societal goals? On the environmental side, I could just give a few examples. You can do things like tokenizing carbon credits as NFTs, giving people access to small businesses, access to purchase these, improve their society. You can even do things like tokenizing maybe endangered species or like the IUCN Red List of threatened species. I've just spoken to a developer who's looking to do that. On the societal front, you can reduce inequality by educating the future youth and generations on how to harness this network effect in blockchain. NFTs can give transparency in government because you can't forge these things. You can prevent counterfeiting, and you can redirect the focus of young people in some of these vulnerable communities to build new businesses that harness this open data, this scarcity effect. And they can connect their business to the world economy so easily without these gatekeepers. On the economic front, I mean, a lot of people now, youths are familiar with digital gaming. I've been involved in sort of bringing these NFTs into digital gaming. We're working with the United Nations potentially to revitalize tourism industry, which has been hit pretty hard by the pandemic in many countries. You can provide gamified incentives to visit local vendors, landmarks in countries. You can also source the origin of goods with NFTs. So things like small batch artisanal farmers, single origin coffee, purple tea from Africa. This is, very, very interesting use cases that I've spoken to people with about. And so by tokenizing all these unique goods, you can bring the world into it. You can bring the worldwide interest. You can give people access to all these things and link the world together. So yeah, somebody on the opposite side of the world can basically facilitate this and find buyers of a small nation's unique goods.
Thank you so much, Vitek, and you're doing a fantastic work, and the world of NFTs is absolutely amazing. Today I saw that there was inauguration of the President of Israel, and they made an NFT out of the giving the oath of this, and many other things which would be done, and probably in the years to come we're going to see a lot of benefits coming out of this. Now with this we go to Yalda. Yalda Alcourt, please.
And thank you, Irakli, for inviting me on this panel, and to my co-panelists, thank you for spearheading such an important conversation. I think technology will definitely play a role in supporting vulnerable communities, because quite frankly, technology plays a role in every facet of our lives. But I also think that when it comes to inequalities at this precise moment in our history, technology is actually exacerbating inequalities and not decreasing them. As you mentioned earlier, I am someone who wears multiple hats, one as an investor and another leading our philanthropic venture arm. And putting my investor hat on, one really only needs to look at how the stock market is behaving now and has behaved during the pandemic to understand the extent of the economic divide. As we speak, the S&P 500 is reaching new highs, while the real unemployment rate in the US, according to the Fed chairman, is still hovering around 10%. In 2020, the core pandemic year, market performance was heavily biased towards technology stocks. The big 5 tech stocks, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Facebook, by the end of 2020 accounted for more than 25% of the index. All this while the US was experiencing its worst economic crisis in history. If you look at Latin America and countries like Colombia, Chile, Peru, inequality and violent social unrest due to economic hardship has become the norm, while the Bovespa index and other indices also climbed to new highs. All of this to say, it's true digital technologies have been transforming markets and how we work and do business, but the benefits of this technological transformation have been shared highly unequally, and the pandemic has exacerbated the deprivations of those left behind. As Brittany and other panelists mentioned, technology alone cannot fix any of it alone. We definitely need better, more responsive public policy to ensure more inclusive economic outcomes are possible going forward to foster more economic growth inclusively. And in terms of immediate policy outcomes around digital transformation, I can personally think of 4. One, competition policies should be revamped for the digital age with increased checks and balances around monopolistic structures. 2, the innovation ecosystem should be improved to promote wider diffusion of tech knowledge to ensure that innovation serves broader economic and social goals rather than narrow interest of a small group of investors. 3, I really believe investments in education and training must be boosted with stronger programs for worker upskilling and reskilling, especially in STEM's field. And finally, 4, labor market policies should encourage worker mobility rather than seeking to protect existing jobs that are being rendered obsolete by changing technology.
Thank you, Yalda. Thanks a lot. And me and you, we've talked a lot about this issue, likewise with Joseph. And we've been discussing how to bring those concrete solutions, those concrete innovations into the mainstream world, and how important it is that policymakers like United Nations, others, governments work very closely with technology companies, with innovations, with people like you, Yalda, with Brittany, with Vitek, and with Joseph, and many others, so that we do make sure that the world which we are living, or which we are leading to, which we are going to, will be better than this one, or at least not worse. So with this, Joseph, please give us your insights on the sort of technology side.
Yeah, I'm always try to be an optimist, you know, and I think, yes, the world is definitely an interesting place now. But I think, like, on the positive side, like the pandemic and kind of this new reality that we're in has also created like tremendous opportunity for, you know, for us to kind of accelerate. And acceleration isn't easy, right? You know, I think when you go from one way of living to a rapidly diverse and different one, it's always uncomfortable. But humans are very good at adaptation. And so I do think that, like, there's a lot of benefits that come, I think, from this unfortunate reality. And that I think that what we're starting to see now as a byproduct of it is really more of an innovation cycle, really starting to kind of kick off. And I think that's happening across many different industries. And I think, like, as it pertains to inequality, you know, I think that a part of that innovation cycle, provided that we can get the policy side right in coordination with technology, I do think that there's a lot of advantages that kind of this next wave of internet adoption or creation, especially on kind of this public blockchain discussion, actually provides, right? And some of those, like, just I think to kind of highlight them, are like this idea that the more that we don't have to rely on intermediaries, the disintermediation of a lot of services that have been, you know, in the traditional context, you know, fundamental to, you know, providing things that we do every day, the ability for us to restream and think about how services are provided to people all over the world really provides a fundamental change in the way that we architect, you know, the global economy. And I think that, like, that's like a really important, like, piece to understand. So whether you're thinking in NFTs, you know, ownership of data, we've been focused primarily around, like, the currency aspects from a policy perspective. How do you, you know, better enable payments to end consumers, whether it be in remittances and other type of kind of use cases, but also on the identity side, right? Like, if you can solve these kind of conditions for people around the world, I think the pandemic is probably going to, in the next, you know, 6 to 12 to 18 months, start to probably allow us to figure out how we bridge the divide a lot faster. And I think that it's an opportunity for us to use these new infrastructures that we have in place to build it right this time. So that leapfrog, I think, is the best opportunity that we all have. I think it's just a matter of collaboration and making sure that we can really get steps in place today.
Absolutely, and the collaboration is really the key, and that's why I'm so excited on starting closely working with you, with Shift Network, with Engine, with Yalda, and with others, with Brittany, so that we do bring those solutions to people directly to make a real change out there, and to make a real impact, so that when we wake up in the next year, and when we see that those vulnerable communities became even more vulnerable, we do have something to offer in terms of education, in terms of reskilling, upskilling, in terms of bringing concrete solutions like you are working on, Joseph, on the identity side. It is so crucial for many people in the world to ensure that, and it is so crucial for the mandate of the UN or for the mandate of the center, which I'm working on, to enable countries bringing technology solutions for the with aim of the crime prevention side, so that people will be educated, will have enough empowerment tools for them to strive in the world which is coming to us. Now, I have some concrete questions. So let's start with Brittany. Brittany, I mean, I thought, and I've read your mission statement there, creating the world's largest fully integrated pure play Bitcoin miner with a zero carbon footprint. So what are the main challenges there, and what do you foresee will be the main challenges in obtaining this mission statement of yours?
One of the main challenges to building large-scale infrastructure to decentralized networks like the Bitcoin network is that right now it's very hardware heavy. So you're obviously incurring a carbon footprint by producing these types of machines that secure the network by solving complex math equations in order to create the encryption that allows the network to be safe and secure. And so obtaining that carbon footprint means that you are going to have to do more in terms of every other part of the operations of your business. I think a lot of people here have probably seen that many of the world's top business leaders and politicians and policymakers over the past few months have been debating about how we actually make the Bitcoin network and other proof of work networks more sustainable because of the amount of energy that is taken. And so even though the Bitcoin network does actually run on quite a lot of renewable energy, stranded and wasted energy, that isn't very well known outside of the industry. And it really is up to companies like us at Griffin to make the decision to go 100% renewable and to build out sustainable infrastructure, not plug in to mixed grids or decide to use fossil fuels and then just purchase carbon credits in order to make an excuse for our business decisions. We are currently using 100% hydroelectric energy, and we are investing in the build out of large scale infrastructure in solar and wind to make sure that we are always 100% renewable and we're never creating a carbon footprint in the main operations of our business. And that is a business decision that we made from our inception. So last year, when we decided to start building this company, we said never going to be one of those companies that decides to use, as some people call it, greenwashing, I suppose, which is to create carbon in the atmosphere and then to make purchases of offsets in order to come back down to carbon neutral. And so that is an important thing that we hope that many other people that are building out large scale infrastructure in this industry decide to do. Because as I said in the beginning, it is about incentive structures. We are creating a new multi-trillion-dollar industry, and building the backbone of this industry in a sustainable way could not be more important, especially as we seek to bring connectivity to so much of the world that currently doesn't have it. We need to make sure that we are having not just a negative carbon neutral impact, but that we are having a positive impact on the communities that we are building in as well. And that's part of our ESG commitments, where we are going to be providing internships, mentorships, jobs, tons of training programs. We have partnerships with schools and universities in the areas where we are building out large scale renewable infrastructure to make sure that, as I said before, again, it's not a wealth redistribution, it's wealth creation in areas that perhaps have never seen these types of opportunities before. And the past few years, I've seen such an incredible boom in small towns that decided to get on board the blockchain technology bandwagon. I specifically have been working in the state of Wyoming, the most crypto-friendly jurisdiction nearly in the world over the past 3.5 years, where a lot of these schools that started teaching blockchain technology to young kids, even in elementary school, now these kids have wealth that their parents never dreamed of because they started learning how to collect and earn tokens through the technology work that they were doing in school. And that is a beautiful thing to see, and a huge opportunity for all of the rural areas that are going to see a lot of these large-scale infrastructure and energy projects coming to them.
No, this is wonderful, and thanks a lot. And obviously, this is the type of solutions which we would like to bring in the different parts of the world. Later at the webinar, at the end, we will have a deputy mayor of The Hague who will be addressing us, and we had a really a lot of interesting discussions how to bring in that type of solutions in some neighborhoods in The Hague and to enable and empower people. But we will be talking about that. So your expertise and knowledge on this, on the experiences you've just mentioned about Wyoming, would be very crucial to sort of to bring it in different parts of the world as well. And we would be happy to facilitate this, and also, of course, to do all of that in a sustainable way. One of the big criticisms of sort of a anecdotal criticism of Bitcoin was always that it is using more energy than Argentina. So later on, maybe you can also address that how to ensure that that's not a wasted energy. Now, with this, I will go to Vitek. Vitek, you've talked about NFTs, of course, and can you sort of deep dive a little bit about how will NFTs change the societal landscape of today, and how can NFTs empower actually those vulnerable groups we talked about, and what are the sort of the main challenges you're facing right now with NFTs today, so and how to overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on a few of the ways that NFTs will empower these vulnerable groups and communities, especially educating the youth, the future generations on how to create interesting businesses that they can tap into the world economy. They can move from understanding these things as collectibles and games into creating them into businesses and supporting their communities in a productive way. In terms of challenges, I mean, there's different aspects to challenges. We've been seeing a lot of technological challenges that we're trying to address. Things like obviously costs of transactions for NFTs are quite high in many cases. Throughput, even just the need to access some cryptocurrency in like Ether, for example, to be able to even use an NFT was a major roadblock for most of the population. And we're seeing networks move to fragmentation, centralization, walled gardens, which is sort of against the spirit of what the blockchain philosophy, essentially. So we are trying to create new standards that the world can use and all blockchains can use. So I was the author of the ERC 1155 standard. Now we're working on a new paratoken standard for the Polkadot community to link different blockchains together, let these NFTs be valuable and continue to move across the networks, not be walled in. And I think tools are incredibly important. It's hard enough for people to understand how to use NFTs. We need tools that are very easy to use, mainstream friendly, to give people that creative outlet. So, I mean, I think education is going to be really important. Like we've seen NFTs being used for collectibles, JPEGs, digital art, and sort of speculation around those things. But I think that there's so much more utility that can be tapped into when you actually that this is a unique, scarce item. You can who created it. You can trade it freely. And then you can start tapping into utility. How do you gamify these tokens? How do you combine them? How do you use them in interesting ways in your business or in your society? So those are some of the challenges that we're going to work on overcoming. We're working on some of these with the Affinity network that we're building on Polkadot, and yeah, it's going to be a very interesting next few years.
Thank you, Vitek, and yes, we're looking forward to working with you closely and learning from your experiences and bringing those experiences in different parts of the world to enable that type of empowerment of young people, empowerment of the other communities who would definitely need that type of knowledge, experience, and solutions. I'll come back to you in the end as well. Now I go to my good friend Yalda, who would need to leave soon, but before you go, Yalda, I would like to ask you a question. We recently have seen that Bracket Capital has raised over $500 million for private market investment strategy and investment partners to some of the world's leading forward-thinking and technology-enabled companies. Where do you see the future of technology goes, and what are the biggest technological advancements today in the near future which will help us to solve those problems which we will face in the future?
Thank you for your question, Irakli. As you mentioned earlier in your introduction, currently under half the world's population is not connected to the internet. At the same time, many believe emerging technologies such as AI and blockchain can potentially play a vital role in shaping an inclusive recovery of the COVID-19 crisis. Well, these are all areas that are very fundamental to Bracket Capital. At Bracket, we believe that investing in highly regulated, complex industries is actually where a lot of the opportunities lie. This also happens to be where the most impact is. Areas such as GovTech, health tech, AI, data analytics, space technology, crypto, blockchain, and climate tech are areas where we've been focusing on increasingly. In government technology, we recently made an investment in a financial platform called Main Street that helps startups and small businesses discover and claim tax credits and government incentives. In health tech, we recently invested in 30 Madison, a company that offers direct-to-consumer healthcare and wellness products for people living with chronic conditions. In a world where data is the new oil, we have a wide range of AI and data analytics companies in our portfolio, like Palantir, Hive AI, Scale AI, which are all solving crucial issues on how we better use and leverage data, especially as we move from an analog world to an Internet of Things world. We're heavily invested in space tech in names such as SpaceX, with high ambitions to connect the remaining 50% of the world's population, which is currently not online, with low orbiting satellites, versus broadband, which has proven difficult to access in certain parts of the world. We're also invested in lesser known names like Akash Systems, which is focused on developing and supplying the next generation of communication gear for space satellites. In crypto, blockchain, and decentralized finance, which our panelists, our co-panelists mentioned heavily already. We recently led a round in BlockFi, a next generation crypto bank. We're very bullish on the potential blockchain and the democratization of information, where no single source will have monopoly over information we consume will have on humanity. Beyond crypto, we think the companies of the blockchain, the likes of the Amazons and Googles of the blockchain, are yet to arrive, and that's where the next technological revolution will be. Interestingly enough, we're seeing a big shift in climate tech from NGOs to private funds, where the vision is that aligning capital revenue making with saving our planet is where everybody wins. It's encouraging that we are now at a point where many of the most profitable problems to solve are also many of the world's largest. At Bracket, we're specifically looking at funding technologies that reduce sources of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, because as we know, until new emissions hit zero, temperatures will keep going up. In summary, these are some of the areas that are keeping us busy, that hopefully will have a great impact on society and make sure that humanity as a whole benefits equally.
Thank you, Yalda, for joining us today, and thank you for working with us closely for a number of years now, and I'm really proud of our partnership, and your advice is always very valuable, and we looking forward to continuing. Before I move to Joseph, I just want to remind the panelists that there are some questions in the chat room, and if some of it is relevant to your area of expertise, please do feel free to answer them directly. If not, to all the viewers, we will try to look at the questions later on and come back to you with some answers. Now, with this, Joseph, I want to ask you that how will identity in general, and particularly solutions that Shift offers, will play a role in a bridging inequality gap we see in the world today, and how will this help the developing world in particular, or the world in general?
Yeah, so we've kind of taken like a multifaceted approach to this, and it wasn't, I think, for the last 4 years, we focused kind of both on the policy and education side. So like working with, other governments to, educate, make sure that they have an understanding on how decentralized systems work, just how public blockchains work, and making sure that there's like regulatory frameworks in place that kind of fit this type of infrastructure. Because I think a large part of this is actually, if we can't figure out how to make the regulations work or the policy side work to the technology, then the services don't actually reach, their end destination. And so we've kind of taken a multifaceted approach on this. On the identity side, we've been working with a few governments on national identity systems. These are decentralized identity systems, and so these the attributes of these systems are interesting insofar as you provide a very high degree of privacy and kind of ownership on the user level, and allow for kind of a much cleaner way of distributing data or controlling data across, everywhere from government services to financial institutions, down to users. And again, this is all about the kind of the redistribution or re-architecting of data networks largely. And that's really what I think identity is. And what is identity? It's my first name and my last name, but it's also the interactions that I deal with every day, right? Identity is so broad. And so I think that the interesting things come in the next few years, provided we get the policy side pretty well understood, is that our ability to stream services, as I described before, from an identity perspective becomes incredibly empowering to everyone. And so the question is, how do we make sure that that's done safely, securely, and responsibly from a compliance perspective, a regulatory perspective, a risk perspective? Those are the things that I think we're working on now to make sure those are done properly. But you have unbounded growth to, the most impoverished people in the world, all the way up to, the developed world today. Of course, different needs across everything, but the same principles still apply.
Yes, you're working on really incredible solutions, Joseph, and my compliments there. And we had numerous chats over this. As I mentioned, we're exploring opportunities, how to work together, how to bring in those solutions to the people, how to bring education and all these experiences to empower and make real tangible results in that. And we'll be sort of talking more over this and hopefully doing some great work together as well. Before I let the panel go, I would like to ask one very brief and quick question to all of you. Maybe in few words, you can give us a recommendation as the United Nations that what do you think are the key steps we should be taking together in the years to come? This is just a very quick reflection from all of you, a few sentences only. So what are the key recommendations from your perspective you can give it to the United Nations, to our center, that we can focus in the years to come? Brittany, maybe we can start with you.
Of course. What I always see as one of the most important initiatives that the United Nations can promote is digital literacy education. It is so incredibly important that when so many of us here are working on building some of these technologies that can empower not just people today, but really the next generation and for generations to come, that we start taking seriously making sure that everyone understands not only how to use these technologies, but how to use them safely and how to empower themselves when creating all of this value. That is an essential program. I know that UNICEF is involved in the new DQ, or Digital Intelligence Quotient programs, and helping entire nations implement this new education program, which allows everyone to have a DQ, like an IQ or an EQ, a digital intelligence quotient, and learn everything from data rights and cybersecurity and how to use emerging technologies, how to prevent cyberbullying, and how to manage your screen time. All of these are so incredibly important to use technology in a safe, empowering, and healthy way. And it will allow every single person around the world to protect their basic rights at a time where it could not be more important, where we have rising rates of unemployment and more people than ever before that don't have access to those basic needs or know where their next paycheck is coming from. So those educational initiatives will make sure that when we have the ability to put technology in the hands of everyone, that it can be employed to the utmost.
Absolutely. Vitek?
Yeah, I think that, the UN has these sustainable development goals, and they're an incredible framework for looking at the world and trying to achieve these goals by 2030. And so I think it's very imperative for organizations like the UN and countries to embrace blockchain. I mean, technology can be used for amazing productive ways, and also it can be used in less than wholesome ways. I think embracing it and working with companies that are thought leaders in the space to pilot programs in various countries and use them towards these sustainable development goals would be a great way to go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vitek. Yalda?
Thank you, Irakli. I think that protecting vulnerable communities from the threat of inequality and being left behind is an issue that requires, first and foremost, a global response, including collaboration between governments and the tech industry, collaboration between advocacy groups, educators, and civil society. It requires major funding of solutions to empower minorities. And lastly, and most importantly, a robust, effective, and enforceable legal framework that the UN can effectively pioneer.
Thank you, Yalda, once again. And Joseph, your last words here and recommendations?
Yeah, I think more kind of dialogue is like what's so important, right? I mean, the UN is such an incredible organization and has so many tools, and I think the more that there's cooperation and these types of discussions and more learning across the mind share, if you will, I think that's like really the most important like first step. Because what I think when you start to really kind of coordinate and collaborate across all these amazing people on the panel and all these other innovators across this space, you start to realize how many more tools we have at our disposal, right? And then it comes down to how do we utilize this new toolkit. So that's my kind of recommendation.
Thank you, Joseph, very much. And with this, I want to thank all of you to take your time and to come to us today and give us your insights, give us insights about the incredible work you are doing and incredible solutions you are providing to the world. And I'm personally looking forward to working with all of you soon and to bring this digital literacy, what Brittany was talking about, those solutions which all of you underline to the world, which so much is in need of and will be more in need of after we hopefully soon recover from this crisis, because we are going to end up in a world which we don't know what it is. And therefore, everything what we have in our power, we need to employ that we live in a better world, in a healthier world, in a more safe and secure world. From the UNICRI's perspective, where I'm working, we're working on the solutions, how to ensure that crime is prevented, criminal justice is done in a healthy and sustainable way. Law enforcement uses technology, but uses it responsibly with the human rights compliant fashion, and all the solutions which we are working on is so crucial to achieve that. And there is an other side of the coin to ensure that crime is not committed in the first place, to ensure that people have tools, education, empowerment, that they are employable themselves, they create wealth, they create new solutions themselves. While doing that, all the crime which may have been committed will be prevented in doing that way. So, with this, UNICRI and our center, myself, we will be launching new initiatives and new projects which will be aimed directly on that, how to empower vulnerable communities, how to ensure that this technology is used for good, how to ensure that youth will be entrepreneur, will be creative, will create wealth and not commit crimes in that sense. With this, I thank you, all of you. And I'm going to go to our special guest and our special friend, Saskia Brunes, who is the Deputy Mayor of The Hague, who is our partner, who is our supporter for a long time, who is our host. The Hague is our generous and very hospitable and welcoming host of the UNICRI Center for AI and Robotics. For a number of years now, we are very pleased to be in the city of peace, justice, innovation. And with that, Saskia is a real champion of all of this, who ensure that we feel at home in The Hague, in this wonderful city. And we will always brainstorm and think, what are the type of solutions, type of issues we can solve together. With this, Saskia, please give us your closing words before we close this webinar.
Thank you very much, Irakli, for your very kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, bringing peace and justice worldwide close to home. It's with that mission that I accepted my nomination as Deputy Mayor of The Hague in 2017. The Hague, the international city of peace and justice, where more than 40,000 people work on issues on peace, justice, security, innovation on a daily basis. People like you from from countless disciplines and just as much cultural backgrounds, dedicating that time to inspire each other and innovate together to address the global challenges that we face in the world of tomorrow. And it's for that reason that I'm very honored to be in your midst today and share some closing remarks. Unfortunately, I've not been able to attend the meeting from the start, but I did hear various interesting perspectives on what we might call the most timeless challenge in society, bridging global inequality. The pandemic has painfully exposed this inequality once more, that was hidden just underneath the surface from some groups in some places. In fact, the pandemic has increased inequalities worldwide. And this development is consistent with the development in our own city. cities are often the hotspots where global societal challenges first emerge. As a deputy mayor, I know that structural solutions for these challenges require a coordinated approach in a multilateral world order. However, where national governments often need time to convert societal urgency into diplomatic action, local governments act on a scale that enable innovative technologies that contribute to a peaceful, safe, and just world to be applied immediately. Moreover, cities also have knowledge and expertise when it comes down to protecting vulnerable groups. Everywhere on a local level, formal and informal networks permeate their neighborhoods and districts where people live and work. That knowledge and expertise are indispensable requirements for societal change. I'm therefore proud to announce that in the coming year, the municipality of The Hague aims to start a pilot together with UNICRI in which vulnerable groups are supported in their recovery after the pandemic. That way we work on the resilience of our city and our inhabitants using technological innovations. And that way, indeed, we also bring peace and justice worldwide close to home. In my work, I often recall the famous words of Eleanor Roosevelt, who emphasized that in chairing the Committee on the Universal Declaration of human rights begin, and I quote, in small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen in any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or the college he attends, the factory, farm or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizens' action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world, unquote. So I call upon you to keep those small places in mind in doing your important work. Be assured by the wisdom that global efforts are often a matter of endurance, but true global changes always start with small steps, indeed close to home. And in those steps, you will always find The Hague by your side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saskia. We found The Hague already, and we love being in your city. We're looking forward to continuing working with you. We're looking forward to working with all the panelists, with all the technology providers to bring this digital literacy, to bring this empowerment, to bring the knowledge and very much needed new solutions to all communities, and particularly, obviously, in The Hague as well. With this, there were numerous questions in the chat room. We had our format to keep it 1 hour. We kept it within 1 hour, this webinar. I apologize if we were unable to accommodate some questions or some interventions from the audience. Next time, we will try to organize a larger event where audiences' interventions will be also accommodated, and we will have people asking direct questions to our panelists as well. With this, once again, thanks a lot for taking your time. Thanks a lot for contributing to this. Thanks a lot of working with us, with the United Nations, and only together, only by multi-stakeholder type of solutions, only by bringing these solutions together, we will be able to live in a better world in the future. With this, this webinar is over. Thanks again.